Good day, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We hope you are well and safe. I'm Talia Hatzor in New York City. I'm the chair of the Committee of Education in the Community and the World, and we are very delighted that so many of you have joined this webinar. I believe you will find this webinar with the speakers and the project that they will be described to you, along with the discussion, fascinating, informative, inspiring, and important in their contribution to the society and to the way one can expand one thinking of psychoanalysis as embedded in societal issues and concerns. Dilis Dos, in one of her articles about parent-infant psychotherapy, says that, and here I'm quoting, Tom Main, one of the British independents, said of psychoanalysis that sitting behind the couch 5 times a week was only one of its applications. With that in mind, let me say a few words about the Committee in Education in the Community and the World, which was established by Virginia Ungar in 2018. This committee studies and supports the work of psychoanalysts in the field of education, formal and informal, around the world. We have been interested in how psychoanalytically informed intervention within educational systems, spanning a broad range from birth through adulthood, can be developed and realized. We have involved psychoanalysts from around the world to describe their projects and engage in a conversation with us to learn and further think about our contribution to society in these difficult times. If you go to the IPA website, and I hope you will after this webinar in one of these days, and look for our webpage, you will see the different projects that psychoanalysts have developed within their communities. These are very inspiring projects, and I highly recommend you go and check them out. And before we move to the pragmatics, last but not least, I want, in the name of all of us, to thank deeply the technical team behind the scene, Nick and Fernanda, for their instrumental support and help. Thank you so much. This wouldn't happen without you. And now to some pragmatics. I guess the first slide now of the timetable. Yeah. So just take a few seconds and look at the timetable. And we'll move on to the next slide. And now please read the confidentiality statement and take a good read and take it seriously. Thank you. And now the next slide, please. So you can post your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And I will be getting the questions, and you will have a period at the end. We will have a period of 15 minutes, 15 minutes at the end to get to some of your questions, which we look forward to. And now we can remove the slides. And I would like to introduce the first project from Barcelona, titled Impact of COVID on Baby Development, 18 months old, Communication Skills and Relationship Group Intervention through Transition to Play Method in an Underprivileged Barcelona Neighborhood. And one of the speakers, unfortunately, Adriana Oliván, is not able to be here today. So the two speakers are Marta Gomà. Marta Gomà is a PhD psychologist and a candidate at the Spanish Society of Psychoanalysis. She's a perinatal psychologist trained at the Lausanne and Geneva University, and she's responsible for research and training at the Brooks Salute Project for Perinatal Care and Psychological Care Services. She's also the coordinator and teacher for the Advanced Certificate of Study in Perinatal Psychology and Maternal Child Health at the Ramon Llull University. And Antonia Llairó is a psychoanalyst at the Spanish Society of the IPA. She's the clinical director of Brooks Salute Perinatal and Psychological Care Services. She teaches advanced studies in perinatal psychology and mother-infant health at the Ramon Llull University since 2021. She's a member of the IPA education community, of the education committee in the community and the world. And she's a member of the IPA parent-infant psychotherapy group. She's also a member of couple and family research group at the Ramon Llull University. And Antonia and Marta, thank you so much for being with us today. And you have the microphone.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the IPA and of course to Talia for joining us to this IPA webinar. We are very joyful to be here, and we are going to share a project that we've been carrying it out since 2014 in a vulnerable population in Barcelona. I'm going to share the screen so we can follow the presentation all together. Okay, now. So as Talia read already the title, we focused on the communication skills and a relationship group intervention through transition to play in an underprivileged Barcelona neighborhood. This research was the first prize on the 10th Research Awards 2023 from the journal Psychopathology and Mental Health of the Child and the Adolescent of the Fundació Orienta. So we are very thankful to them. And also this project is supported by Ramon Llull University and the Catalan Health Care Center and the Spanish Society of Psychoanalysis. What we did in this research was to, we've been doing some explorations of the development at 18-month-old babies in a Barcelona primary care center. And we were evaluating how they develop and also the mother-baby relationship by two blind psychologists. This started in some years ago. And then when we explored after the COVID, we observed some changes in the relationship and the baby's development that we were following up on these children since we started this project in 2014 in the healthcare center. So we compared this population of 18-month-old attended in this healthcare center. We compared this population in the pre-COVID, so before the COVID started, and after the COVID. And we observed that communication, the mean of the communication and the mean of the social relationship of these children diminished in a very significant way. These results were very shocking because we were intuitively perceiving this diminishing, but also in the mother-baby relationship, we saw nearly 15 points less in the Pirgas scale. After this, if we look only at the post-COVID population in this Barcelona primary care center, we analyzed 107 psychological examination of these babies, and we saw that the communication area, the mean, was close to the preoccupation area. This means that many children had communication problems, and this was associated to social relationship. These results, if we look at this 107 population, 50% of them received no referral to any service after this evaluation, but 31% had communication problems, and 40% required early intervention because several areas were affected. These results, we can think that the population in a vulnerable sector is less available to resources, but also the deficiencies in the emotional bond with babies can be explained because of the family situations experiences, because we know that depressive anxious symptoms were higher during COVID and after COVID, because these had an incidence on mother-child interactions, but also some physical aspect of the use of mask that was obscuring the mouth, and this mirroring and this relationship was very affected. Also, the implementation of security measures due to COVID was not sending children to school or not going to playgrounds, not sharing these social possibilities for very early child for the children, and also parents were isolated, and this also affected the parent-child interaction. So we know, because many psychoanalysts work on communication and language and how important it is for the development of the baby and for the symbolic process. So we know that it's a method of socialization, of humanization and regulation of the behavior, and that it's based on helping the people to communicate with their environment. And the family is the element that helps socializing the baby and helps to promote the communication skills and offer encouragement. We know that there are many aspects that gaze and affection, listen, speak and respond, asking questions, naming emotions, singing and dance, read tales and play. We need all these areas to promote the language in the relationship. The aim of these groups that we prepared were welcoming the family and improving the children's language and communication skills through welcoming the parents and discover the play inside the healthcare center. So it was based on closed groups, children from 18 to 30 months of age, accompanied by their parents in the primary care center, and the requirement was low development in the communication area. We were meeting the families at the first floor of the building, helped by the pediatric unit. There were two professionals, two perinatal psychologists from Brook Salud team, and helping the parents in this small space with 8 participants at maximum 90 minutes, but during 8 weeks, once a week, regularly having our rhythm with the babies. And the intervention proposal was to help them to play together around language communication and socialization. If we look a little bit at the sessions, the first one was the welcoming, and this helped to promote the group cohesion. We work on learning colors and shapes, understanding with simple instructions. We played with our mouths, blowing and with elements and games with the babies. We sing to the rhythm of music. We tell stories, we communicate through play, we talk about emotions, and we prepared a farewell. The farewell was accompanied by some reminder for the parents. They could use these tips to remind the group and all we worked in the group. And also the kids had a medal with their name and the puppet that we used to welcome them and to say them goodbye, that they were wearing just to say goodbye and to identify themselves. If we look at the results of the group intervention, we are looking at these three areas: language and communication, socialization, and mother-baby relationship. The communication was improving very much because we were in very low mean, all these 17 boys, and then we finished with a communication of 40, that it's very healthy. In the social relational aspect, there was an improvement too, and it was also significant. And also in the relationship with the mother and the baby. And we were thinking on these results on how important is this period of 18-month-old children, because it's a stage very sensitive of language. If we can introduce some help for the families that they can start playing with the children in their own home, how this can promote a really nice change in mothers and babies. The parental participation in the group is very important because it has also an impact on the emotional bond. That there's preventive functioning in this intervention because it's at early stage, but also it has an implication for the future because we know that when we can promote the language, there's a reduction of aggression at school and better literacy. The psychoanalytic thinking, it's on the basis of the groups and how we understand this intervention, because there's an importance and positive effect in the primary health care team. Now Antonia is going to talk about a clinical case, so you can understand a little bit how we are working with these kids and families.
Hi, I begin to introduce our main character in the groups, is the Quack Quack, the glove puppet, is the main character in the groups and is welcoming the kids every session. Now, a brief clinical vignette about 2-year-old patient who participated in the first group. When Luis joined the new group, he was an extremely shy child and had many difficulties with interpersonal relationships. His behavior was limited to simply observing the environment without engaging in any type of interaction. At the beginning of the first group, he always sat in the same place in the room next to the family member who accompanied him. He did not make any kind of movement of wanting to explore or play with the items provided. He did not leave his seat or separate himself from his mother until it was time to end the session and put on his shoes to leave. In the sessions, he did not make sounds or any type of communicative intention. The expression of his face practically did not change. He had an expression of constant sadness. On the other hand, when the different members of the group addressed him, there was an eye contact, just as it was also evident that there was an understanding of the instructions given to him. Luis is the youngest boy of three brothers. There is a big age difference between them. His mother explained that he is the stuffed animal of the house. He was born a few months before the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. When the state of emergency was declared, Luis was 5 months old. Luis' mother is a clerical worker and explains that she spent the entire period teleworking and with her son clinging to her chest, suckling. Luis did not separate from his mother. There was very intense contact. This aspect has been established in the mother-baby relationship and is still present 2 years after the child's birth, hindering his development and growth. The mother explains only she understands him properly. This is not the case with the other family members. Although the child's difficulties are evident, there is a lack of awareness about them on the part of the mother and denial. He is a very shy child, and that's it, says the mother. In the third session, Luis' attitude is the same. He enters the room, takes off his shoes, sits at the same place as the previous week, and observes the movements of the different members of the group without participating. Today's activity consists of playing with the movement of the mouth and tongue to improve articulation and oral production. Once all the members of the group are settled, I explain that we will help each other. All take a piece of cotton so we can make a ball with our hands and blow it backwards and forwards between each other. The aim is to take turns to promote the relational aspect. Luis passively observes his mother making the ball. The children begin to play with each other along their families. Luis watches. Luis observes the movement of the cotton ball and how it moves towards the place where he's sitting, but he remains still, impassive. He doesn't make any movement. We decided together with his mother, as in the previous sessions, not to pressure him. Give him a little more time so that he can observe how the rest interact. I have the feeling that on some occasions, Luis is a little isolated and separated from the group. He is still, behaves well, and bothers no one. It reminds me of the mother's earlier remarks. A child who is attached to the breast, with his mouth covered and thus cannot complain, is no trouble and lets her work. A child who is there, but isn't. At this moment, I decide to make a cotton ball and subtly move it towards Luis. I show him the ball and blow on it. so that it moves slowly towards him. The boy looks at the cotton ball and looks at me. A few seconds pass. Then he slightly leans.
Antonia, we can't hear you. I don't know what happened.
Now?
Yes, you have to go back to a couple of sentences
Yes.
after he looks at you.
Now we can hear, you can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, sorry. Maybe a child who is attached to the breast with his mouth covered and thus cannot complain is no trouble and lets her work. A child who is there but isn't. At this moment of my reflections, I decide to make a cotton ball and subtly move it towards Luis. I show him the ball and blow on it so that it moves slowly towards him. The boy looks at the cotton ball and looks at me. A few seconds pass. Then he slightly leans forward and timidly blows the ball towards me. Luis' mother is shocked by what just happened. It is the first time since the beginning of the group that the child has interacted with someone other than his mother. Luis and I repeat the game several times. His face has brightened a little. He seems a little more lively. Luis and his mother have accepted the inclusion of a third as a step in the development. The above clinical vignette shows the process that Luis underwent during the course of the intervention, based on focused and weekly work where the needs of the baby and the parents are listened to and understood. The child can detach from his mother in a healthy way to explore and grow and work on the relational difficulties shown previously. During the sessions, Luis can participate more and more in the activities that are proposed, and there is a greater interaction with the other group participants, not only with the professionals who guided it, but also with the rest of the children, that is, their peers. Thanks to the observation of the child's functioning in the group session, his mother can slowly become closer, more sensitive, and more active in coping with the difficulties. Luis' progress gives hope to the mother, who feels relieved and grateful. Even though the intervention was brief and focused, continuity in Luis' speech development was considered necessary. So once the group work ended, Luis was referred to the early intervention by pediatric professionals to continue working on his communication abilities. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Antonia, Marta. That's so fascinating and such an important work. Before we move to the next presentation, I just want to remind the audience that you can post questions on the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and I will be collecting them, some of them, to be discussed at the end of all the presentations and discussion. So now to the next presentation from India, Breaking New Grounds, Taking Psychoanalytic Concepts to Rural Schools in India. We have two presenters, Minnie Dastur and Manju Mukhi. So first, Minnie Dastur is a training and supervisory adult and child psychoanalyst in India Psychoanalytical Society. She was trained at the Tavistock Center of Human Relations in Child and Adolescent. She is a member of the IPA China Committee of Psychoanalytic Training. She teaches and supervises, and she heads the continued professional development at the Mumbai chapter. She is a member of the COFAP committee and of the IPA Committee in Education in the Community and the World. Manju Mukhi is a child and adult psychoanalytic psychotherapist. She works in clinics of the Mumbai chapter of the Indian Psychoanalytic Society. She also coordinates the clinical work for the child psychoanalytic psychotherapy trainees. She's currently coordinating the rural project in Alibag. She heads and coordinates all the analytic work done with children and adolescents at the 3 schools that the Mumbai chapter of the Indian Psychoanalytic Society is involved with. She's part of the training committee of the Mumbai chapter. Minnie, Manju, the microphone is yours. We are looking forward to hear about your presentation.
Yes.
And
hi. Thank you, Talia. Thank you, the team of Fernanda, Nick, and very interesting what we heard just now from Antonia and Marta. But I want to share the screen now with you about this project that we started in the rural area. And it's important in a way to know that they have absolutely no exposure whatsoever to an idea of an inside world and an outside world. So the introduction had to be done in a kind of very concrete way before they could begin to think about their own internal selves. So I proceed about breaking new grounds, taking psychoanalytic concepts to schools in rural India. We are the Mumbai chapter of the Indian Psychoanalytic Society, doing psychoanalytic training, work with patients, with children in schools, and outreach programs through our trust's BTRC. With the advent of online sessions, we hope to spread the training and therapy of psychoanalysis beyond the 3 cities in India. Since several years, we have been offering psychoanalytic psychotherapy pro bono to 4 schools in Mumbai. Ms. Manju Mukhi, psychoanalytic child and adolescent psychotherapist, is in charge and directs and oversees all the work done by our therapists in these schools. Now, a chain of fortuitous events led us to being invited to talk to the children, teachers, and parents in a school in Alibag. This once sleepy group of villagers was suddenly woken up by the influx of city dwellers establishing their second homes. The village folk who sold their land to the city folk now aspire to live, speak, and dress like the new incumbents. Where previously all their education was in the vernacular, several English medium schools have sprung up. Mr. Ashok Hiramat, one of the new settlers, sponsored Care Car, a car trip of 1,000 miles undertaken by one of our training analysts, Ms. Mukhi Bhatia, along with 3 other women. En route, they visited several schools and gave talks on mental health aimed at vulnerable sections of society. He then asked us to conduct similar talks to a school he sponsors in Alibag.
Hence, we undertook our first foray with the Vaijali English Medium School. It was decided to take up this project as a kind of intervention which could help open up the minds of parents, teachers, and children towards the importance of freedom of thought and one's own potential for imagination, creativity, and growth. Next slide. 4 of our members, Abha Shah, Bhavani Dayal, Yamini Namjoshi, and Shelly Shah, conducted sessions in the vernacular, as most of the students and the teachers were still hesitant and not very fluent in English. A rapport building exercise was the starting point, to stress that different people think differently, yet can be connected in one, to be aware of one's own binary thinking. The idea that talking to someone like a counselor could help one know oneself better was attempted to be slipped in between the lines. The idea that stable states of mind were essential to be able to pay attention, implement learning, and building good relationships.
As a follow-up thereafter, our training analyst, Ms. Banu Ismail, gave a talk to the teachers and parents of this school to understand the concept of mental health and its relation and difference from physical health. She addressed parenting methods and understanding children's emotions. And we have 2 PowerPoint presentations to show the kind of workshop conducted to lay the ground for development of a partnership between the school and us. So this is the rural setting you can see in this place, Alibag. And I need to mention that what was once just a couple of village houses and one tea shop has now just sprung up with all kinds of shops, even beauty parlors that the locals run. So you can see the rural setting of this school with the hills behind. This was conducted by Bhavini Dayal and Abha Shah. The aim of the workshop was exam stress, since that was what was most requested. The students were teenagers in grades 9 and 10. We were asked to help the students to manage exam pressure, which becomes the most prominent concern for parents, teachers, and students, especially in academically important years. We hope to help them understand that an exam was beyond academic pressures and could be applied to testing situations in life, that there's more to life than academics. Therefore, it was most important to understand oneself and be able to think independently. The rapport building exercise, the facilitators already has a sense of the interactional space they would walk into and therefore had planned their activities accordingly. The students' inhibitions impacted the girls and boys in different ways. The girls tended to huddle together whilst moving, and in written activities they tended to copy each other, whilst the boys used bravado, kept to themselves in the presence of the outsiders. Using drama games, the facilitators tried to make the children see that there wasn't much difference between them and us. Similarity of likes and dislikes in various fields were explored. The movement activity that was used. The facilitators noticed rigid defensive reactions and students who were in enclaves. The activity of moving within the space were used where the students were encouraged to reach out to each other. Examples of shrinking space and open space was done to make them think of how touching others could open space, while withdrawing reduced space, and to show the similarity with spaces in the mind. How one can form connections with people as individuals and beyond gender differences. The facilitators use their own bodies to encourage openness and movement. Students also got in touch with emotions by making angry, stressed, sad faces, which was connected to the emotions surrounding exams, but also to realize that we continuously face exams in our life with situations that seem to test us. Reflecting on self. The students were asked to reflect and fill in this worksheet. Through their responses and behavior, it was observed that some were free enough to express their individuality. Through their answers, while some tended to copy one another. Some tended to decorate their boxes as if their mind was flowing more freely on paper, adding some kind of efflorescence to the box shapes. Facilitators touched upon unexplored parts of mind with a question mark. When they discussed this with their peers, the students seemed to feel, can I tell people about myself? Can I bring my village friends in touch with my school friends? Bring together individuals in different spaces? Could the facilitators and students build trust and openness to learning from each other? To conclude the activity, the group was divided into smaller groups. The aim of it was to ask for help and receive help with managing pressures. We encouraged them to extend the idea of reflecting on oneself to see if the suggestions given to them aligned with their own thinking. While discussing, what emerged was how they perceived themselves, how they would like to be perceived by another, and how they were actually perceived. In one example, a set of girls who were best friends said this activity helped them to get to know aspects about one another that they were previously unaware of. This helped us show that unexpressed thoughts may create an opening given the freedom to come through. There seemed to be a release with more openness in their movement, which was also observed as a movement internally felt through their openness in speaking. Some observations. At the end of the session, some windows seemed to be opened up. Some girls spoke about the conflict that they had with their choice of career from what were perceived by their parents as a better choice for moving up. The students were helped to think of the importance of having a dialogue so that new consideration could be given to each one's frame of thought and the possibility of working it out. Some students spoke of idealistic aspirations, which seemed like omnipotent and magical thinking. They were helped to look at both reality and idealization and how the two could come together. That there was not just one yellow brick road to success, but several by-lanes for each individual to follow. It was observed that ones who could speak in English felt more confident, leaving us with the thought about whether one's own language is not good enough. Can one value one's own base while also taking on the good outside of it? At the end, a male student came up with a riddle masked as a question. What happens if you were to travel back in time and kill your grandfather? Your grandfather would be dead, meaning you would have never been born, which means you could not have been alive to go back in time and kill your grandfather. But that means your grandfather would be alive and you would be born, and so on with seemingly no answer. The facilitators felt that he was displaying some bravado and saying, I will challenge you with this impossible question because in your session, you left me flummoxed when I had to think about myself. But it had flummoxed the facilitators because they felt it was quite an existential question and involved love and hate, the time he was in at this very moment, and some time way back in his past that had remained a riddle. A little bit like Little Hans in the Stork Box, and a bit like a Russian babushka doll, one inside another. But there was no time left to explore it. Maybe that was what he wanted. Some things are best left unexplored. Thank you. Now Manju will go on.
This is the second session conducted there, and it was conducted by Yamini Nam Joshi and Shelly Shah. A workshop was conducted for a group of 70 teenage students, the concept of mental health and what impacts it. The focus on the effect of media on the mind and self-image was introduced. What is mental health? The therapists and students introduced themselves and shared things loved and things frightening. The children relaxed with this interaction. The idea of mental health was illustrated by using two water-filled glass jars depicting two states of mind. Some items, such as mud, leaves, flowers, rusted nails, gravel, were placed in the jars. The children followed with each event in the story that told of the impact in the mind. They shouted out what to add to each jar. Flowers, mud, pebbles. They began to relate confusion and worry with mud, joy with flowers, and angry feeling with pebbles. Some children commented on how neither felt perfect, that the idea of being mentally healthy, that popularly is seen as split between feeling good and feeling terrible, was now being interpreted differently. The uniqueness of self. The therapist instructed the group to simply draw some specific shapes, explaining that there was no correct or incorrect, what perhaps in psychoanalysis links with free association. The result was that each drawing had a different arrangement and style of the very same instruction. We laid these drawings in the center of the room for all to observe. There was an unexpected silence at this moment of observation. Some children had a look of intrigue. Other children seemed to be looking intently at the interpretation of each drawing. This activity freed up and set a tone for an open and non-persecutory setting. The whole picture activity. Initial reactions to image of man in the helmet. The group said he was an astronaut on a mission in outer space. He was alone, searching for something. While one saw loneliness, the other saw possibility. Unmasked reaction. When the picture of the man in the helmet standing in a field was revealed, there was a whoop of shock. It seemed like they had become so adhered to their mental pictures. They then spoke about what they felt was happening now. They said that he was a man waiting for someone with flowers, hoping they would come. Initial reactions to image of the palm trees. The group discussed how this was the Maldives, a place for celebrity holidays. They said the rest of the image was surrounded by resorts and beautiful beaches. This group seemed collectively unified and identified in this fantasy of grandeur. Unmasked reactions. The group was disappointed when they saw the trash that surrounded the beach. They exuded a sense of loss for their desirable fantasy. They said it was a beach where no one cared. It was a place that had been forgotten. They seemed disheartened, as if they had suffered a personal loss. Role play, observing and understanding. The therapists enacted two small skits for the group. The first showed one student pressurizing another to let her copy her homework with the threat that she would not be invited to her grand birthday celebration if she didn't comply. The second skit entailed another student asking his friend to help him bully the new child in class. On his refusal to join in the bullying, he was called weak and spineless. Both these vignettes were read aloud by the therapist as a two-part dialogue, and each was thought about as a group. The intention was to steer away from judgment and to reflect on a situation, what each character felt and why they made the choices they did. The intention was to map out the layers of the inner worlds, the numerous feelings that can be at play at the same time. In the discussion, some children said they felt both children in play needed help, as one was too dominating the other unable to speak up. Others felt quite clear about bad and good and felt a grown-up needed to intervene in such overwhelming situations. And to conclude, some observation. The day's work together closed with reflecting on the various activities. Children spoke out about the shock they felt when they saw the whole picture. Others spoke about feeling worried when they saw the jar mines becoming dirty. Some felt that the life of movie stars and famous cricketers were great, but now understood that even their lives are not perfect. The session ended with a discussion on aspects that enhance feeling internally well, what one can do to recognize our emotions and being able to communicate the same, knowing when something is too much or too little, spending time with the people we love and who love us, doing things that give us joy and make us feel like we are growing and using our abilities.
Thank you so much, Minnie and Manju. And thank you all presenters for this really inspiring, very moving project. I was just thinking that there is so much imagination, creativity, and playfulness with deep ideas behind them that your psychoanalytic mind has generated and is bringing so much empathy to these children, but also developing their own capacity to understand themselves and to discover their own minds and interiority. Thank you so, so much. This is very, very moving. And now we will move to our discussant, which we are very honored, Suzanne Maiello, that you are with us to discuss these two projects. Suzanne Maiello is a founder member and past president of the Italian Association of Psychoanalytic Child Psychotherapy. She's a member of the International Association of Analytical Psychology and the Association of Child Psychotherapists, Tavistock section in the UK. She coordinates the AIPPI Mother-Infant Research and Clinical Group at the Prima Infancia, Rome. She's faculty at the AIPPI Child Psychoanalytic Training and faculty of the Master's Program in Psychoanalytic Observational Studies at the University of Essex. Suzanne, the microphone is yours, and we look forward to hear your thoughts.
Thank you, Talia. Thank you for the invitation and for the presentation. I confess that it is not easy to summarize these two very, very rich presentations, but I will try to find some common denominators. In fact, my task as a discussant of the two presentations could not be more challenging, especially if we want not only to make a few considerations around each of the two presented educational settings, but try to identify some common denominators beyond the fact that we observe both of them through a widened psychoanalytic lens. What does a primary care center in an underprivileged neighborhood in Barcelona in Spain have in common with a private English medium school in Alibag, a small rural town in India? The vertex of verbal language may represent the red thread which connects the two presentations and allows us to observe a few aspects of the two learning situations from a point of view of verbal communication. In its development, verbal language has a crucial communicative function and is at the same time, as young children learn to speak, the expression of the gradually developing symbolic function. At the collective level, every language is the unique expression of a specific culture, and every human being is born into a specific mother tongue, whose characteristics are internalized already during prenatal life. In the past 30 years, psychoanalytic thinking has shown an increasing interest in the interdependence of intrapsychic, interpersonal, and cultural processes. Berenstein and Puget introduced, alongside the intrapsychic and the interpersonal dimensions of subjectivity, the notion of its transsubjective dimension. This consists in the culture-specific relations, including verbal communication, which the individual entertains in a shared social environment. This insight is meaningful whenever we approach a cultural setting through the lens of a method which is rooted in the nourishing ground of another culture. To get in tune with Minnie Dastur's and Manju Mukhi's presentation from India, a comment from the Indian psychoanalyst Sudhir Kakar may lead the way. Quoting him today is also meant as a tribute to this great psychoanalytic thinker who died only a few weeks ago. Kakar was keenly aware of the impact of social and cultural differences on psychoanalytic theory and practice. He wrote, "The paramount concern of psychoanalysis seemed to have been in protecting and gathering evidence in support of its key concepts, rather than in entertaining the possibility that other cultures, with their different worldviews, family structures, and relationships, could contribute to its models and concepts." In a nutshell, we could say that every time we take psychoanalytic understanding either to a non-Western cultural environment or to a non-clinical setting, we need to listen rather than to teach, and respond to the emerging anxieties in the language capable of reaching the participants not only verbally, but at deeper levels of their experience. Now commenting on Minnie Dastur's and Manju Mukhi's presentation. In her introduction, Minnie Dastur vividly evoked the social and cultural turmoil into which the teenager boys and girls of the Vejali English School of Alibag in India had been thrown from the beginning of their lives. Their parents and grandparents had been exposed to the arrival of wealthy people from the city who bought their land to build their seaside homes, leaving the local rural population with more money than they had ever seen before. During the same years, the social media had started invading the planet and opened the wide world to culturally unprepared communities. Minnie Dastur vividly described the economic divide between the locals and the settlers. The cultural divide was probably just as important, and the new access to the world motivated the parents to offer a better life to their offspring and free them from their ancestral poverty. The issue of language became important and motivated the families to send their children to English schools. English has been the language of the British colonizers of India for centuries. Now it has become the key to any career in the wealthy Western world. And the pressure on local families and their children inevitably increased further. However, social and cultural transformations need time to consolidate. If the process of change is too fast, psychological and social fragility is inevitable. I wonder whether Minnie Dastur and Manju Mukhi would agree that bringing psychoanalytic attention to the Vejali English School might be seen also as an attempt to repair the cultural upheaval, which was in part caused by the very arrival of the economically and culturally wealthy people from the city. In this connection, it might be meaningful that the facilitators who introduced the Alibag school project felt that they needed to communicate in Marathi, the local language and not in English, because not only the children themselves, and surprisingly, I would say, even the teaching staff were not fluent enough in English to communicate easily. Furthermore, the fact that the visiting colleagues decided to dress in traditional Indian clothes when they met the school children shows how much they were aware of the cultural divide and tried to adapt to the local reality, even with their external attire, in the endeavor to reach the children in their world. The PowerPoint showed vividly how the facilitators did, in fact, in only 2 meetings, manage to build a bridge of communication with the children who seemed to make meaningful discoveries and responded readily to the suggestions of new ways of perceiving themselves and the others. Meeting the teachers, and especially the parents, is certainly a crucial part of any such school project, especially in a place like Alibag, with the turmoil of its recent history, which inevitably had an impact on the parents and the grandparents' social and mental lives. It is understandable that they want to invest their new financial availabilities into their children's education now by sending them to a private English school. But it is also inevitable that they will project their own frustrated educational needs into their children and exert pressure on their offspring for a successful school career to compensate them for their own frustrated ambitions. The parental expectations represent inevitably an enormous pressure on these boys and girls. It is not by chance that one of the main sources of anxiety of these early teenage children are the exams. On the original worksheet, Reflecting on Self, with its meandering path and the blocks which the children were asked to fill in with their names, their preferences, and their dreams, the before last block was occupied by the word exam, written in capital letters and followed by 2 exclamation marks. What the worksheet does not suggest, but each of the students knows, this is the deep source of their school anxiety, is that exams are marked and that there is a divide between pass and fail, and that a failed final exam may put a barrier across the path that was supposed to give them access to the realization of their and their family's dreams. On the very last and smallest block at the end of the path in the original version of the PowerPoint, there was just a question mark. By definition, schools are selective and not inclusive. If there is competition, there are inevitably winners and losers. Not knowing what the future will bring is bearable if we have had the opportunity to introject enough self-confidence to allow us to face exams and even to fail them. But if defeat is felt to be too humiliating, the answer may be either depression or revenge. On the last page of her PowerPoint presentation, Minnie Dastur writes that at the very end of the meeting, a boy came up with a riddle. I repeat it. What happens if you were to travel back in time and kill your grandfather? Your grandfather would be dead, meaning you would never have been born, which means you could not have been alive to go back in time and kill your grandfather. But that means your grandfather would be alive and you would be born, and so on, with seemingly no answer. Now, my comment concerning this riddle. The facilitators understood the implicit meaning of the challenge. The boy had felt overwhelmed by their attempt to put him and his schoolmates in touch with, quote, quite an existential question which involved love and hate, end quote. They intuited that he had moved back in time somewhere into his family past and brought to the here and now scenes of murderous violence, which inhabited his young mind. Either or, no third option, no way out of the repetition of vengeful hatred in relation to his ancestral history. The PP version ends as follows, but there was no time left to explore it. The riddle. Maybe that was what he wanted. And their final comment is, some things are best left unexplored. In hindsight, we may wonder whether this teenager boy's wish to kill his grandfather could be taken very seriously at a metaphoric level. He may have voiced not only an individual, but a shared need to revisit not only the turmoil of the past 20 years of his rural community, but at even greater depth, the collective ghosts in the nursery and the transgenerational transmission of his people's ancestral past. Now I'm coming to the discussion of Marta and Antonia's presentation. My comment to today's first presentation brings us back to Europe, but our main focus will remain on the multiple functions of verbal language as a means of communication, and at the same time, in the situation of young children as the harbinger of proto-symbolic mental activity. In the infant's first relational vocalizing and babbling experiences, the bodily and sensory elements are of crucial importance. In this research project, the turmoil in the world outside was endemic due to the socio-economic reality of the living conditions in an underprivileged neighborhood of Barcelona. The specific element of environmental turmoil, however, concerned the impact of COVID, as Marta showed us, on the quality of mother-infant communication. The research showed that the pandemic, as an additional source of anxiety, had a further inhibiting effect on the mother's emotional availability and consequently on the infant's need and ability to be in mutual relation with the caregiver. The lack of communication inevitably has an impact on the development of the child's proto-language and language skills on both levels, communication and symbol formation. This is the area in which the relationship group intervention program of the local primary care unit set up its psychoeducational project. The parents' involvement in such programs are of crucial importance at more than one level. The fine-tuned encouragement of communication, which is initiated by the psychoeducational facilitator, is meant to reawaken curiosity in withdrawn infants. In deeply deprived situations, the relational links need to be initiated with the child at the most elemental psychophysical levels. The caregivers are present and will feel encouraged to encounter the child who is slowly coming to life. Thus, the vicious circle of mutual isolation is transformed into a virtuous cycle of mutually gratifying emotional connectedness. In the Barcelona project, the sequence of interventions is carefully balanced, starting from the establishment of basic connections, of eye contact and subtle encouragement of reciprocity, and ending with the child's growing motivation over time to interact and explore relationships and external objects. The project serves also as a diagnostic screening tool, as we heard, to decide whether the obstacles of the child's relational capacity have been removed or whether the child needs psychotherapeutic help. Now to Antonia's contribution about the little boy, Luis, who was 2 years old. The baby was 5 months old at the beginning of the pandemic. The mother started home working and kept the baby sucking at the breast all day long. COVID spread death anxieties all over the world. Mother tried to keep her fears at bay by maintaining a state of delusional at-one-ment at the tactile level with her child. At 18 months of age, there was no sign of pre-verbal communication in the little boy. He seemed emotionally frozen, emitted no vocal sounds, and his face was immobile, but he had a sad expression. This in itself was encouraging because an autistic child does not have a sad expression. He was not totally withdrawn, but expressed his emotional state in some way and also observed his surroundings, although he did not move from his mother's side. In a later session, when fluffy cotton wool balls were blown from one participant to the another, again, Luis did not participate, but did observe the other participants' movements. And when at a later meeting, Antonia softly blew a cotton ball towards him, he did observe the slowly approaching fluff. His eyes then looked at her. This was a crucial and profoundly meaningful moment of emotional transformation, a turning point in the functioning of the baby's mind in dimensional terms, Meltzer. The fluffy cottonwood ball, which rolled towards the child, bridged an undeniable distance between Antonia and himself. Furthermore, when Luis looked at the ball and then at Antonia, he drew a virtual triangle in space. I, the ball, a blowing somebody over there who moved the ball, a living other. Two pairs of eyes met at that point. When little Luis slightly moved forward and timidly blew the ball back towards Antonia, the link was established. Blowing the ball did no longer coincide with losing the nipple, breast, mother forever, but it meant separating and reconnecting playfully with another human being, being recognized in her otherness. The fact that the playmate was over there at a distance and that the ball had first come towards Luis may have been the prerequisite for his decision to run the risk and accept the to and fro game, which created a shared field in which flexible links could be created. Primary interpersonal rhythms create the possibility to explore the alternation of presence and absence in ways which allow primary trust to develop and reinforce both the capacity to bear unforeseen variations and the absence of the other, without being overwhelmed by separation anxieties. During the to and fro of receiving and blowing the weightless ball, which implied autonomous breathing, inspiration and expiration, Louis' face was serene. It looks almost smiling. His mother was deeply surprised, but seemed capable of accepting this crucial transformation. I think the Barcelona project is a precious experience as it bears witness to the crucial importance of early psychoeducational intervention. Now to conclude, psychoanalysis and education use different tools, but both perform parental functions, insofar as their task is to nourish the primary human need, wish, and capacity to experience and to learn, as well as to help recognizing and hopefully removing internal obstacles which prevent the emotional and mental growth of the children's learning minds. What can psychoanalysis contribute to educational settings? I suggest that its aim does not consist in teaching any psychoanalytic concepts, nor in transferring its models to learning institutions. What psychoanalysts can transmit to an educational setting, both to learners and teachers, is essentially their capacity to create a containing environment for both, thanks to which it becomes possible to observe and listen, and to resonate with the participants at sufficiently deep emotional levels in the endeavor to identify the obstacles which may inhibit the learner's need and wish, either individually or collectively, not to learn about in Beyond's terms, but to learn from experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. This was a feast of ideas that enriched so much these presentations. And I'm sure all of us have a lot to say and to think together. I'm wondering if there is any questions. Okay, so I will say to the audience that they are welcome to post their questions now. And until the question starts coming up, maybe we can start in a bit of a conversation between us, and maybe I can bring a question that you, Suzanne, brought to Manju and Minnie. You say in your presentation, you wonder whether Minnie and Manju would agree that bringing psychoanalytic attention to the Vaijali English School might be seen also as an attempt to repair the cultural upheaval, which was in part caused by the arrival of the economically and culturally wealthy people to the city. So maybe Minnie and Manju would want to say something about that question that Suzanne brings to you, your thoughts about the cultural divide, what was going on in the deeper layer that was happening in that community, and what you think you were repairing on that deeper layer. You are muted, Minnie.
I was very struck by Suzanne's very perceptive discussion about the foray into the school. But just to say one thing, that, you know, when I say that psychoanalysis hasn't got any place there, but Indian culture and Indian history is ever so rich in myths that actually, just as much as Greek myths, embody psychoanalytic concepts or gave rise also, maybe like Narcissus and Oedipus. There's several. And one of the ways in which one can often reach children and even adults is through Indian myths and through Indian stories. So psychoanalysis and Indian culture are not so separate, but the idea that children could benefit from somebody who could help them explore unspoken, unexpressed, unknown, unthought known, so to say, to quote Ballas, about themselves. And the divide that is there in Alibag is so stark between the people who have built magnificent villas and the locals, that somehow the locals might feel a bit inferior. And that results in some kind of bravado and defiance. But there has been a great attempt to integrate. And through schools is in some way one way to integrate, that people are not so different.
Manju, do you have any thoughts about it?
Not really at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Suzanne, do you want to add something? You are muted.
Yes, just to thank Minnie for her comment. I perfectly agree that the richness of the local myths are exactly the place where we can find the roots from which then enter in touch with these groups of people. It's like we call them in the Western world, we call them fairy tales. Of course, they are myths, and the myths really contain basic human emotional truths. So going through them to reach the children, I think, is a very good idea. Rather than thinking that we know something, that we have a model that we must, that will be useful for them. Go and get them in their culture and help them to get alive in their culture.
I was very moved by your quote that you bring, Suzanne, of Kakar, and I want to read it, to repeat it, and maybe have the reaction of the panelists to this. And anything you want to discuss between you, the questions and answers are slow to come. Maybe people are thinking, because this is so rich and there is so much to think about. But the quote that I found so moving and complicated and important to think about is, the paramount concern of psychoanalysis seems to have been in protecting and gathering evidence in support of its key concepts, rather than in entertaining the possibility that other cultures, with their different worldviews, family structures, and relationship, could contribute to its models and concepts. And it is such an important place to think. And maybe I want to open it up. I'm having a lot of thoughts about it and a lot of questions myself about our lack of awareness of this idea. But maybe hear from also Antonia and Marta or anyone else about this.
Could I just say something?
Anything.
Which is not really with educational setting or with children, but I find that there are certain cultural ethics or an ethos of a particular society. And what strikes me, having worked in China as well, where China have this thing called filial piety, where in a way the son is beholden to his parents and must look after them. In India, too, we have some idea of responsibility for parents that are aging. Also, we have some idea about trying to make marriages work rather than giving up on them soon. Now, maybe what we can use is evidence that somehow Indian families stay more together and less conflicts or marriages that work. And also parents and children that don't have to believe that to be independent, you have to separate completely and have nothing whatsoever to do with them. That is something I think that may be culturally valuable and it makes us more stable society. That's my view. Of course, I'm in India. But I was wondering whether we could even think about that.
We have a lot to think about. Maybe we can connect it a bit also to, I was thinking of Marta and Antonia's presentation and the ideas that you were, first of all, this important project, such critically important project of, and I think we've been talking a lot about it, you know, what's happening to language, We see these kids, they are not speaking the way they are not developing in the same way, and the way you address that. And I was wondering, because this is a larger cultural issue. I have to say I'm working with migrant mothers here in New York City with refugees, migrants from mainly Venezuela and Colombia and Ecuador. And the issue of, you say that you, Antonia and Marta, you say that you tell the parents to avoid using the pacifier and the screen, right? The use of the pacifier, like boop, right?
Yes.
Boom, right? And this is, I would say, at the level of epidemic in this population.
Yes.
So I want to think a bit with you about it, because how do we reach parents, talk to them, help them from that insider view, not from the outside, you know, the psychoanalyst educator that comes and tells them, you know, this is not, but how do you reach to parents on that deeper level so they understand why this is a problem for their kids, as opposed to come from a more hierarchical place that tells them what's right and wrong.
Yes, I was thinking that Suzanne ended up with learning from experience. And I think having the experience all together with the babies and their parents or the caregivers in the session and in the here and now, enjoying together and expressing and finding ways to play, to enjoy around the play, as Winnicott also help us to think and to be aware of this. And in the cultural terms, it's true that we have plenty of families that are migrants, and we try to make them participate with their own fairy tales, with their own songs, and share it in the group and try to sing them together, or to share these experiences that connect ones and others with these different cultural points of views and experiences. And I think this is very, very important, because we can sing Catalan songs, and the Catalan songs are those the kids are going to sing in the kindergarten, but then they have their own songs, and sharing this in the group is really, really playful and important for these different cultural settings. And I think this experience that Suzanne was mentioning, and this emotion that is coming up with the mothers reflecting on their own past, on their own childhood, is really, really touching and useful for these babies.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
May I just add, I think this is very true. And what you said, now it can be myth, sharing a myth with older children. It can be singing songs from your home country together. All this brings emotion into a shared environment. And I couldn't agree more with you when you say no pacifiers. Because you put a pacifier into the child's mouth, you plug him. Because without the pacifier, the child would cry. If the child cries, there is something to be heard, something to be taken in, a pain, a fear, an anxiety, hunger. We don't know what, but the child wants to say something. By plugging the mouth, you will not only imprison his emotion, but also the language development. So I think it's very important. It looks like something, a little detail, but it's fundamental.
And you know, when you say that, I'm associating to the families with young children, in the migrant mothers, and why they wouldn't want to hear the child cry. I mean, it's true, but then there is this very difficult place of them not being able to tolerate the child's cry, and how delicate and difficult is that work, which I think was exemplified with this mother, because maybe there are times when going immediately into the infant-mother relationship, into the relationship, is not the best place to go, because going into something that she's right, the idea that she would then see an experience that the child is having and be able to accept it opens up more possibilities for her than perhaps if one would address directly what is going on between them. Just, you know, it's always a challenge and a thought about.
And may I just add that if mothers can't tolerate the child's cry, it's because in their internal world, their own internal child is crying, and they can't comfort two children.
Exactly.
So they need to be listened to in order to be able to listen to the baby.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I could.
Yes,
Yeah, go ahead, Antonia, and then, because we have 1 minute left before we will be
Yes. No, I want to say it's a very important part is to have the mothers in the group taking place with the kids, because they have they feel welcome, they feel accepted, they feel understood, and it's very important because the migrant mothers are isolated very often, and the introduction and the participation in the group was essential for her, yeah, for them, yeah.
Thank you. We got to the end of the webinar, and we just started talking. We could go on for a long time. First of all, I want to thank you, Antonia, Marta, Minnie, Manju, Suzanne, deeply for coming to this webinar and sharing your work and your thoughts. This is invaluable. For the effort of doing this, and it is very appreciated. I want to thank the IPA. I want to thank the Community in the World Committee in Education that has brought us together and brought these ideas and the importance of communicating them. And I want to thank the audience. We haven't heard from you, but we believe you are living with a lot of good food to chew and think about, a lot of good thoughts. So thank you very much. And as they say here, to be continued. Have a lovely weekend, everyone.
Thank you so much.